Hello, I am the Lady Miss Vagina Jenkins, and it is time for Queer Astrology. As a reminder, this is the second video in a short 3-video series where we talk about how to begin interpreting your natal astrology chart. In the first video, which I'll link over here so you can check that out, we talked about beginner concepts like what are your big three, what's your chart ruler, where is the light found in your chart. And in this video, we're going to talk about some of the more foundational, traditional astrology concepts that astrologers use to understand your chart. The first concept that I want to introduce to you is the idea of sect. This is a traditional Hellenistic astrology concept that talks about the rising sign and how it divides the chart from night to day. If the rising sign is the sign that is on the horizon at the moment of your birth, then that means that the setting of the sun can be represented directly opposite of your rising sign, right? If we look at this example here, we can see that the rising sign is on the left half of the chart, and directly across from that would be the setting of the sun, the descendant sign. So then that tells me that everything that's on the top half of the chart is the daytime hours, and then everything on the bottom half of the chart is the nighttime hours. And so I always look for where the sun is in the chart to understand, hey, is this a day or a night chart? The sun symbol is a little circle with a dot inside of it, and in this chart that is for James Baldwin, we can see that he has a day chart. To me, the difference between a day and a night chart is more about being externally or internally focused. A day chart, I definitely think about a person who is more focused on society, community as a whole. How do other people do things? Understanding the systems and hierarchies at play, that kind of thing. And then when I think about a night chart, I think about a person who is more internally focused. How do I work within these concepts? How do I think? How do I develop myself? Those kinds of questions. And I would definitely describe James Baldwin in that way, in that his writing, his lecturing, his academic work, his organizing and activism was all centered on, I would describe it as understanding the ways in which society works, which is definitely a more externally focused thing. On the opposite side of the thing, let's check out this chart for Oprah Winfrey. Again, we are looking for the sun to understand if this is placed in the top or bottom half of the chart. The sun is that circle with the dot in it, and hers is placed in the bottom half of the chart. So this is an example of a night chart, a more internally focused experience. And it's interesting to think about Oprah as a more internally focused person because she's like this famous talk show host, right? But I would argue that the most success, or how she is known to people, is by talking about her internal experience and sharing the ways in which she healed herself from her childhood trauma. So even though she's known to millions across the world, I would definitely say that her work fits in the category, or work and life fit in the category of being a night chart, in that it was all about, in that it was often about, I want to share with you this internal experience that I had, if that makes sense. Also offer up that a lot of traditional astrology concepts are heavily gendered. I think about this because people will also describe the day versus night divide as masculine versus feminine, where the day is supposed to be more masculine because it's externally focused and more action oriented, whereas the night chart is supposed to be more internally focused and passive and thus feminine. Gender as an astrology concept is very much a traditional Hellenistic concept, and it's one that I do not really use in my practice. As an agender person, it's not so important to me. I don't understand why the heteros be gendering everything. But I do acknowledge it as a concept, and I just wanted to share with you that the idea exists that these qualities can be gendered, elements can be gendered, the modes could be gendered, the signs and planets can be gendered as well. It's just not something that I use in my practice, but it may be a tool that you would like to use in yours. So I thought to mention it. The same way that we can divide a chart along the horizontal axis, we can similarly divide a chart on the vertical axis and understand some layers of meaning there as well. When I divide a chart in the vertical axis, I'm looking for the number of planetary placements either on the left or right side of the chart to understand about if this is a lifetime that's spent more working on the self or working on the other. By self versus other focused work, I mean more, is this lifetime supposed to be spent on healing oneself, understanding oneself, developing and bettering oneself, or is it meant to be spent on healing, developing, serving your communities? Now we have created 4 quadrants in the natal chart wheel. We've divided along the horizontal axis to understand day at the top, night at the bottom. You could also call that public or private, external or internal. And then we've divided along the vertical axis to understand the difference between self and other. So let's talk about these 4 quadrants that have been created. I would call the first quadrant, houses 1, 2, and 3, the experience of the private self. And so what I mean by that is understanding your own identity and how you move through the world, a lifetime spent understanding your values, a lifetime understanding the ways that you think. Yeah, those are the kind of experiences that I think about when I think about a person who has a majority of placements sitting in that first quadrant. And then we move to the second quadrant, which I would call the quadrant of the private other. This consists of houses 4, 5, and 6. So having a majority of your placements here in the second quadrant could be more about a lifetime spent focusing on understanding and serving your family, or the family that you create. Doesn't necessarily just have to be family of origin. This is a lifetime understanding what it's like to create and do self-expression in the world. This is a lifetime spent on understanding health, daily routines, and like improvement practices that sort of serve the community that you're in, your local community. And then we come to the third quadrant, which I think of as the public other quadrant. When I think of having a majority of planetary placements in this third quadrant, I think a lot about a life spent or an energy signature that is very much focused on understanding one's partnerships, both romantic and platonic. I think about the experience of being focused. I think about the experience of being focused on sharing of resources and community care, mutual aid, that kind of vibe. I also think about the experience of understanding the larger world around you and the pattern of the world, and really understanding your beliefs and philosophies, and maybe even being able to teach those philosophies to other people. And then that brings us to the fourth and last quadrant, which consists of houses 10, 11, and 12. And I think of that as the public self quadrant. And so having a majority of your planetary placements in the fourth quadrant could speak to the experience of literally having a public self, being known by many people in the world, being seen by many people in the world, definitely having an externally focused experience, but an externally focused experience of sharing oneself. And so I think a lot about an emphasis on career and public reputation, or an emphasis on friend groups, or being known in society, generally speaking, and also the experience of like spirituality and understanding one's self in the context of one's like religious or spiritual, social spiritual experience. So yeah, we've covered the concept of sect as well as the concept of the 4 quadrants in a chart. So the concept of sect and the concept of the 4 quadrants speaks to where things are in the chart. Now let's get into the specifics of each of the planetary and luminary placements in the chart. So there's the concept of the elements and the modes. By elements, I mean fire, air, earth, water. By modes, I mean cardinal, fixed, or mutable. So what we're trying to do is understand more about the energetic signature of your natal chart by looking at each one of the planetary placements and understanding what element they're in and how they do that element, the mode. So the elements, very briefly: fire, air, earth, water. Fire is the energy of like passion, of starting a thing, of enthusiasm. Air is the energy of logic, communication, ideas. Earth is the energy of stability, groundedness, tangibility, things you can touch and experience with your senses. And water is the energy of intuition, connection, feelings, connection specifically to something bigger or greater than ourselves. The modes are very much based on like the idea of the seasons, which is something that I very much love about traditional and tropical astrology. But the modes are cardinal, fixed, or mutable. But what I meant by the modes being based on the seasons is that each of the 4 cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, start off their respective seasons. So Aries starts off the astrological new year on the vernal equinox. Cancer comes along, starts off summer on the summer solstice. Libra comes along and starts off the fall season on the fall equinox. Yes. I forgot the word for that for a second. And Capricorn ends the year or starts off winter season with the winter solstice. Those are all the cardinal signs. And then we get to the fixed signs like Taurus and Scorpio. So if Aries puts forth the idea of starting a new year, spring, then Taurus is the sign, the fixed sign that is committed to that idea and works that idea and is loyal to that idea. And then you have the mutable sign, Gemini, that is more adaptable, that is more flexible, and asks us to gently transition into the summer season. And then Cancer, cardinal sign, puts forth the idea of the summer, you know, and so the cycle keeps going throughout the seasons. It's just something I really, really love and enjoy about astrology. So yeah, the elements and the modes are super important to understand. Lastly, I want to introduce briefly the concept of the essential dignities. So you may have heard me say in previous videos, oh, such and such sign is ruled by this planet, Aries being ruled by Mars. What we're talking about is the concept of essential dignities. There are more favorable aspects, or excuse me, more favorable dignities, like being in rulership of, or domicile is also a word that's used, or in exaltation of. And then there are less favorable aspects, being in detriment, being in fall. Another word that's used is debilitated placement. And so, yeah, these are concepts to understand so you can know how the planet is doing its job in terms of efficiency in your chart. As a beginner, I would advise to only concentrate on 2 of the 4 essential dignities, and that is rulership and its opposite, detriment. And the example of Aries and Mars, you want to know that Mars is at home in Aries, and then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you want to know that Mars is in detriment in Libra. And why this is important is so that you can understand, you know, like I said, if the planet is working efficiently in your chart. Going with the example of Mars again, Mars is a lot about our passion, our drive. And so knowing that Mars is in Aries, that speaks to, oh, being able to have a lot of drive, a lot of passion, and being a person who needs to follow their passions. On the other hand of things, Mars being in detriment in Libra helps me to understand that perhaps being moved by passion and your desire to win or conquer is not the way that you get things done. You know, perhaps it's the opposite, that you need to be more community minded, more balanced in your approach, more balanced in your energies. I hope this video helped you understand some of those traditional foundational concepts in astrology. We covered Sect, the night or day chart. We covered the 4 quadrants. We covered the elements and the modes. We also covered the basics of the concept of essential dignities. Like I said, I'll likely make longer, more involved videos on each one of those concepts later, but I just want to introduce those concepts so that you can have another lens to interpret your natal chart. Like I said, I think a lot of people go immediately into the deep end of what are all my placements? How are they aspecting with each other? But I think some of this foundational stuff might even serve a little bit better into understanding really the energy imprint of your chart. This is the second video in the short little series about understanding how to interpret your chart. The next and final video in this series will be focused on the houses and the planets and the signs. I know that's the stuff that everybody gets really excited about. So we'll be breaking those down and understanding a little bit more about them. So definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell. New videos every Wednesday. Comment below. Did you understand these concepts? Should I go a little bit more deeper in my analysis? How can I be of service? Ask me questions. I love talking about this stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for making time for queer astrology. Bye.